Thanks for joining us for another episode from the 2025 e-bike light shootout. Today, we're gonna be taking a look at the Marin Rift Zone XR-EL. So the Marin Rift Zone is part of a 13 bike shootout where we are focusing on the low power drive unit e-bikes. We are here in Klamath Falls, Oregon. And before we get into the performance and how this bike handled, we'd like to thank the sponsors who have made this massive undertaking possible. So we have outfitted all of the bikes with Schwalbe's radial constructed tires. We have the Albert Gravity out back and a Magic Mary Gravity up front.
Enduro has kitted us out with both warm and cold weather gear, keeping us comfortable no matter the temperatures. And Giro has given us shoes and knee pads, keeping us glued to the pedals and safe when the knees hit the dirt, which they have.
You love laying on the ground, don't you? And of course, we'd like to thank our host destination, Discover Klamath and the Klamath Falls region, as well as the Running Y Resort, a bike-friendly hotel that is just minutes away from two incredible trailheads. So let's get into the performance of the Marin Rift Zone XR-EL. In an effort to try to keep these videos as short as we can, aren't gonna recite all the things that you'll be able to read on a website from a checklist. So we're gonna touch on geo features and how they perform, because you can't read that online. We will link to our written review at theloamwolf.com and also to Marin's website. So let's get into the range test that our 195-pound test rider did with the Bosch drive unit.
Our test loop was 13 miles, 1,300 feet of vert. The bike was primarily ridden in boost in an aggressive manner to try to see just how far the battery would last. We have the Bosch SX drive system right here. We did a pre and post update test. Pre-update, the bike used 300 watt hours of battery and was about an hour, 3 minutes to complete that loop. Post-update, things drastically changed. While the finish time did get shorter by quite a bit, 4 minutes or so, so did the battery range, just got consumed immensely. It used up 388 watt hours of that 400 watt hour battery. And that's not great if you want to get out for a huge mission on the trail.
Yeah, and again, we put that bike, and all bikes, I should say, all drive units and battery combos through this test loop back on our home trails, just so we could compare and sort of see which ones were the most efficient, which ones were the fastest, and how everything sat. We have put in some much bigger days on the bike. We have gone into the Bosch Flow e-bike app and modified tunes, especially the non-boost tunes. So, you know, we have put in some multi-thousand foot days. We also have the range extender for this bike, which can, you know, obviously help you get a little bit further into the backcountry or get more laps. But nevertheless, my takeaway on the Bosch SL, you know, or SX drive unit for SL category e-bikes is, if you want that power update, an SL e-bike's probably not for you. You might be a full power fan. Unless, of course, you, like we did, detune all the other modes and you keep that boost for your lunch lap or your after work, you know, power hour before the sun goes down. So keeping in tune with drive unit, let's talk about the climbing performance, Geo.
Yeah, so geo-wise, just wanted to quickly mention that our size large, 490 mil reach, longest reach on test, also one of the shortest chain stays on test. So on the climbs, you're finding this balance of kind of a long reach up and around the corners, but the back end really snaps around some of those tighter corners. Really nice suspension, you know, the butt dyno feel, as we've been saying, from this bike. Using overrun to get up and over the steps has been awesome from the Bosch system. Overall, it's comfortable and predictable on the climbs.
Sean?
I felt a little bit stretched out on the climbs to the point where, like, it was one of the few bikes where my hands started going numb the closer we got towards the top of our climb. And that was a bigger takeaway for me. I was like, this might not be the bike for me, just for that climbing comfort.
Yeah, I will say that the bar and grip spec also is not doing any favors there. Like, these are pretty uncomfortable bars, but again, you know, it's one of the more affordable bikes, so, you know, swapping out some parts could be doable. I agree though, suspension platform, I really liked. It was comfortable. You're a very long-legged fellow. Did you not have a problem with the short chainstays and keeping the front wheel down? I guess the long reach would kind of compensate.
It definitely compensated. It's definitely a longer reach than I generally would gravitate to, specifically for that kind of forward feel. But when I'm talking comfort, I guess I was more referring to that, the butt dyno feel. But yeah, I concur with what Sean says, that, you know, that longer reach, my tall saddle height, a lot of hand pressure on those road climbs.
Something that I liked about the short chainstays, you know, again, we're lucky enough that we have so many bikes to choose from that we can pick the bike that's best for the day and where we're going to ride. And I know that's not the case for most people who are having to buy one bike maybe for everything. But today, you know, one of the techie climbs, hill climb challenges that we do, I saw an option line that I hadn't tried before, and it had kind of a slab to like a gapped step up. And this was the bike I was on, and getting like the combo of the Bosch overrun along with the short chainstays really let me accelerate up that first slab, pick up and like thrust the bike forward and get up onto that next feature. And that it made that thing really effortless, even though this is the heaviest bike in the group test. So yeah, I think overall it's a pretty good handling bike up and down. It certainly has its unique features, you know, or attributes depending on the type of terrain. But like flipping over to the jump trail that we rode, this bike, I wish it was a little lighter, which would help really accentuate its playfulness. But like there were some like sections where I would be jumping and like kind of kicking out the back end and like tire scrubbing stuff. And I was really blown away at how the suspension can on one hand feel like more than 140, like it's a very plush and smooth 140, but it also did really well when I wanted to preload and get air for like some of the like roller optional gaps that were, I don't know, over 20 feet long, I'd say, and this thing would just go pretty well. Sean, what did you think of it on the way down?
I initially had high hopes for it because I really liked the way that Marin's ride, and the multi-track suspension platform is very cushiony, but that feeling that I was hoping to get was, I mean, sadly overshadowed by how stiff the bars were and the amount of feedback I was getting through my hands, that it just kind of distracted me and I couldn't charge as hard as I wanted to. But I mean, like, if we were able to swap those around, I have no doubts that this thing would be so sick on the chunky bits of trail that we were on today.
It definitely rides really good through the chunk and starts to ride as if it has more travel than it does. When you get into some of those flowier and pumpier bits, it's taking more energy to get and keep that speed. I would hope that in my mind, after riding, I was like, man, if this was a 160, 170 in the same platform, it's not going to add any more weight to go up and travel. You know, it's negligible in terms of total bike weight. But that is where I think this bike, if I could mix and change things, like I'd love to see a longer travel version in the same power, drive unit and everything. I think that's really where it would come alive.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, you know, like we said, bars, you know, cockpit stuff's easy enough to change. It is something that detracts from an otherwise very smooth and comfortable feeling bike. I'm a big fan of alloy frames. I like the way alloy bikes ride.
Manuals very well for being as heavy as it does.
Well, again, in the short chainstays, right, make that thing so much fun to move around. But yeah, I think a longer travel version would be sick. Maybe there's going to be one coming soon to like complement the SL, you know, e-bike line from Marin, and we'd love to see it. Speaking of loving to see, I really like the looks of this bike and the paint job, like this like kind of I don't know, bronzy gold, like flake. What do you guys think about fit, finish, and value of this bike at currently, I think, $72.99? Yep. Obviously ranges from, you know, $49.99 up to this top of the line model at $7,300.
Yeah, I mean, for a top of the line model, you are getting pretty much everything you would hope for, right? I would say I'm not a big proponent of upgrading to gold stanchions for the fact of upgrading to gold stanchions. Having Performance Elite front and rear, like for me, like that, I don't need anything more than that.
I mean, that's the bare minimum that I would look for in a bike too.
So for sure. And the brakes, like I like them. It's just they're very different coming from Mavens and how much more you can modulate these. Big fan of lever shape. Love the Magura lever shape.
I did not like the brakes. They were on this and the Polygon. And I sometimes like Magura brakes. But both of the Magura brakes that we've had on this Shootout have required so much more lever force to pull that, combined with the bar, really is fatiguing on my hands. Like these and we've changed the brake pads. So I don't know if it's just this brake or what, but like they just don't have the bite and the flat out stopping power. They're great on the flow trails where you're wanting to scrub speed. I love the modulation and kind of that soft feel you get out of them. But when it comes time to like really needing to shut it down, they just lack all out bite and power. So to me, that's a bit of a bummer. Also, you know, not on this bike, but on another test bike with the Maguras, we just had a complete and total failure with like a oil coming through pistons. So I just don't know. And I've heard that's happened on other media outlets test bikes. So I'm not sure if there's a consistency problem with a batch or something, but nevertheless, I'm not a huge fan of the brakes. Not a huge fan of the bar. So there's parts that we're probably going to be updating. While we're talking about stuff I'm not a huge fan of, I don't love the charge port cover. It's really hard to press it and get it back in and sealed up. Anyone else have a problem with that one?
Yeah. It took me a good 4 or 5 tries to get
it sealed. It is very tight. Like it will keep water and mud and all this other stuff out. So like I really do like that. But yeah, it is very hard to get it to seat back in there, which is, I guess, good and bad.
Cable porting is also really nice too. I love when the ports have that screw to kind of clamp everything down and keep it in one place.
Yeah.
On the subject of cables though, there is a lot of cable rattle in this frame. And it's kind of distracting, especially when paired with that Bosch rattle.
Yeah, for me, if it was my bike, right, we owned this thing, I am very confident that I would be able to isolate and insulate that sound to get rid of the cable rattle. Obviously, like, you know, time is short. We've got a lot of bikes, and so we're not going to fully take stuff apart to like wrap cables. Like if it was our own bike, we're just gonna, you know, based on the space and what's going on in there, I'm sure we could get that thing a lot quieter, which would then just leave the Bosch rattle, which we have talked about on all of the Bosch equipped e-bikes. But yeah, I guess there's the good and bad of the Bosch stuff. Okay, so obviously there's a few nitpicks and criticisms there. Let's talk about where the bike overall shines, who you think the ideal rider's for, and where it sits in your stack of test bikes.
I think someone that's eyeing up a comfortable climbing experience as far as butt dyno feel, someone that wants to push Nissan chunk, but also still have a bike that's snappy enough for those more blue style flow trails, and maybe not like the beginner jumper because it takes a lot of effort to get it airborne.
Mostly because of the weight, you think?
I think mostly because of the weight, yes.
Okay. I mean, that's a fair assessment, and I think like the end user is going to also need to kind of realize that they may need to make a few changes after their purchase just to kind of really fine tune that ride that they might be looking for.
Which, you know, at $72.99 for a otherwise pretty high spec. I mean, most other bikes with a similar spec are going to be over $9,000, I would say. So like, you know, making a bar stem or a bar and grip combo swap, you know, maybe get a wireless dropper post to remove one potential spot for some cable rattle is not, I would say, like something I wouldn't consider doing if I were buying this bike. I overall really like this bike. Again, we are testing 13 bikes, right? So we have a lot of bikes, and when you start trying to figure out like, okay, there's a lot of good bikes. Some are pretty good, some are good, some are really good. And you start having to like really figure out value matters, like spec matters, you know, all fit and finish. Like there's a lot of stuff that really we have to start isolating. And to me, right, when we talk about the grand scheme of things on the score sheet, right, a bike that we recommend versus like at the top of our list versus like the third is really only like maybe a 9.25 versus an 8.75, right? It's not like a bike's not great or it's not a really good bike that'll make people happy, but like not everybody can be a winner at the same time. And I'm not saying this bike's not a winner. I think this bike is a lot of fun. Whenever I take it out and ride it, I'm having a great time on it. It's playful. I love the way it handles in the air. I do wish it were lighter, but again, price, right? Like, so there's that. But I love the short rear end for playing. I like the way it corners and I can press it into berms and flow trails. So yeah, to me, if you're a rider that's not regularly like seeking out like enduro terrain, you probably aren't going to be looking at a 140 bike to begin with. But yeah, I think if you're handling moderate chop and chunk, you got some bumpy terrain, but you want a bike that's going to have a short rear end to help you play and get over that stuff, I think this is a pretty solid machine. If the Bosch and the 400 watt-hour battery is in your wheelhouse and that's something that you're okay with, this is a good Bosch equipped, low power, mid power SL e-bike. I think for the right consumer that this bike could absolutely make them very, very happy, having a great time. Like I said, I had a great time when I rode it all the time. So yeah, but I would like to see a long travel one for sure. Yeah. So, all right, folks, thanks again to Schwalbe Endura, Giro, Running Y Resort, and Klamath Falls. And of course, thanks to you guys for watching, engaging, commenting, and sharing these videos with your friends. If you'd like to join us, please subscribe to the channel. We got a lot more bikes to work our way through before the grand finale to see where the Marin stacks up against the competition. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the trails.